certainly the State Department, believes in the diplomatic option, but there is also this sort of push and pull and struggle with the administration, who still seem to be bent on attacking Iran militarily before they leave office. And it's unclear if that's really going to happen. I mean, the current rumor in D.C. is that that it will happen and that it's going to happen after the November elections, so it won't harm any Republican chances at the office. But, it is deeply disturbing that this is even being contemplated.
And here's the thing about that. I think, maybe what you're getting at beyond, I don't know exactly what your view is of Iran having nuclear weapons, or, if they ever did, whether you would think that was okay or not. I personally don't care if they have them or not, but all indications are, as you said when you referred to the NIE of last November, that they are not even attempting to develop nuclear weapons right now. And my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that in order for them to even attempt to begin to enrich highly enriched uranium to weapons grade above 90%, they would have to withdraw from the Non-Proliferation Treaty, kick out the IAEA, and announce that, we fooled you. We only went along with the Safeguards Agreement long enough to get our enrichment centrifuges up and going, and now we're withdrawing, and now we're going to attempt to begin to enrich enough any weapons-grade uranium so that we can make a bomb out of it. And then, even at that point, we would have a couple of years to bomb them before they were ready, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be very, very difficult, without, short of Iran purchasing, some sort of already fabricated and assembled, nuclear weapon on a black market. It's going to take, even by our own intelligence estimate, it's going to take up to a decade before Iran really has the capability to produce enough highly enriched uranium for a nuclear weapon. And this has been, sort of the consistent estimates on this for actually a number of years. I mean, so this isn't something that's new. And, my opinion is that Iran would like to be like a Japan. It would like to have all of the material, it would like to have all of the technology and know-how, but it isn't necessarily bent on acquiring nuclear weapons. I mean, there are certainly hardliners in Iran who would like to see a nuclear weapons program. They think it's essential for their national security needs. They do feel threatened, and they do want to increase their power in the region. But that does not, in my opinion, represent the majority of even those who are in power in Iran, and certainly not the majority of the people of Iran. I mean, when we talk about the people of Iran, if you walk on the streets in Iran, most people can tell you about centrifuges, can tell you about enrichment, and can tell you that they have a right to enrichment under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is very interesting because, it's not really an issue where you walk around the streets of other countries, most people wouldn't even know what a centrifuge is. So it's very interesting, how this issue has become such a central role, but by and large, the issue of nuclear enrichment, the issue of nuclear power has become an issue of prestige inside of Iran. And, I just don't think that they are driven towards nuclear weapons, and that's certainly the conclusions of the 16 spy agencies in the National Intelligence Estimate.
Right. Now, the IAEA, which is on site, they can continue to prove the negative, that nothing has been diverted to a secret nuclear weapons program or military purpose or any other thing. And yet, in the same article in the Telegraph that we were talking about, the spin here is that the Pentagon doubts that the Israelis have found all the secret nuclear facilities that must be there. And so maybe that's a reason to not start bombing them, is because wherever their secret weapons program is, we don't know where it is.
That has been, one of the talking points of those actually in favor of military attacks. I mean, this article does present very conflicting arguments in many respects, but, one of the arguments for those in favor of military attacks has been, that we don't know exactly where all of Iran's nuclear facilities are, that we only know what's been declared to the IAEA, and it's likely that they have some sort of secret facility and they're much further along than we actually think. And, there is, of course, the possibility that is true. So the best way, and this is actually, something that the International Atomic Energy Agency Director General has called for, is for Iran to re-implement the additional protocol to allow more intrusive inspections, and that would certainly be a confidence-building measure that Iran could do, to give some trust back, because there are concerns that Iran was pursuing a covert nuclear weapons program prior to 2003. So, Iran does need to restore some confidence, and that's part of the reason why Western countries are calling on Iran to suspend enrichment. So, it does go both ways, and Iran certainly does need to restore some confidence into the Western powers, but threatening Iran militarily is not going to accomplish anything, and in fact it only bolsters the position of hardliners in Iran who would seek a nuclear weapons program.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious about the whole thing about they had a weapons program up until 2003. In a sense, I sort of thought that was propaganda in itself inside the NIE, that maybe the anti-war factions were sort of conceding something that maybe was halfway true or something to the others. How juries often compromise. They'll find a guy guilty of, a lesser charge or whatever rather than fight about it.
I mean, I actually saw that in very similar terms, as possibly a face-saving gesture, to say, well, we've been right so far, and they did have a nuclear weapons program, but they stopped it, and this is why it worked, and so this is what we should be doing. I did actually kind of take that, because there is not, consensus in the international community that Iran had a nuclear weapons program. Now, if you look at the more recent International Atomic Energy Agency reports on Iran from the Director General to the Board of Governors, I mean, you'll find that what has become sort of a central issue once again is the so-called laptop, which found studies for weaponization and other various things related to the development of a nuclear weapon. Iran, dismisses this information out of hand. They say that, this is just propaganda, that the evidence was fabricated. So the IAEA is trying to get more clear answers, from Iran exactly about, what role this laptop has played and what, if any of this is true. So, if Iran is more forthcoming in helping with answers to that question, that would be another, confidence-building measure on the part of Iran to really help resolve this issue about whether or not Iran actually did have a covert nuclear weapons program.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, a couple of things there. I believe Dr. Prather pointed out, he's our nuclear physicist at antiwar.com. We keep him around because he used to make nuclear bombs, and so he knows about this stuff. And I believe he pointed out that in the most recent IAEA report, they said, it's kind of confounding that the Iranians have not answered every question about this stuff. On the other hand, we have not been able to produce the documents for them to even refute. They have not seen the evidence against them in order to dispute it. They've just been told that there is such evidence and dispute that. Don't they say that in the most recent IAEA report?
Well, no. I mean, Iran was actually presented just before the March IAEA report was delivered. Iran was presented, with the evidence. In fact, part of the issue was that, the U.S. and Israel had this evidence and had not handed it over to the International Atomic Energy Agency. And they did so in March, I believe it was, or the end of February, as the IAEA was wrapping up the questions and answers with Iran from the August 2007 modality to answer some outstanding questions. So all of a sudden, the U.S. turns over this intelligence to the IAEA, and really, I mean, the only reason why they would do that would be to block any sort of progress and to raise new issues, and certainly that was part of, an effort to bring more sanctions to bear against Iran for its nuclear program, because in the middle of March, a new Security Council resolution was passed imposing more sanctions.
Right, and so in a sense, too, it sort of shows, or at least, if I was running the Iranian government, I would have taken the lesson from that it doesn't matter how many questions we answer, they're just going to keep making up new questions no matter what.
Well, I mean, certainly there were political motivations behind that, and this has sort of been an ongoing issue about this laptop for a number of years. And, it would be very helpful. I mean, Iran's response again to that was that, that it was all fabricated data, that it was, they just dismissed it out of hand. So, it would be helpful, though, for their own case, if Iran would actually respond to those. But, I mean, one thing that Director General Abadi did say was that he wished that Iran would have been more proactive in terms of answering the questions agreed to in the modality. I mean, this was an issue that was raised because the IAEA had to keep going back to Iran. The Iranians weren't forthcoming, and certainly there's a reason for them to do so, because clearly there are political motivations against Iran. But even the Director General has said that it would be more useful if Iran was more proactive rather than reactive to questions. And, it's basically, if the inspectors didn't ask just the right question, they wouldn't get the right answer. And that makes conditions and the IAEA's work to really verify compliance much more difficult.